Mic test 1, 2. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Josh and I've decided to start a series called Honest Conversations where I just talk about life being a Christian man in this day and age. For some of you who may not know me, my name is Josh and I'm married to my wonderful wife, Audris, and I have a daughter. We have a daughter together called Amber Grace, and we are Singaporeans living in Perth. We moved over to Perth about 2 years ago, and we are in that process of understanding how to navigate this move still. And at the same time, while I'm here, I'm actually serving a church in Australia. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. We are learning how to navigate our life as parents, at the same time still figuring out what it means to be husband and wife to each other. And so I thought, you know what, I want to do a series. I want to do a series of videos where I just have very honest conversations with this camera here and whoever's watching, but really, just wanted to note down these few moments and things that I've learned being a Christian man in this day and age. I think one of the biggest struggles that for me as a Christian man is that there are a lot of challenges that we don't speak about. There are a lot of things that we don't talk about as a man, and what more being a Christian man in this day and age. And so I thought today could be the first of many conversations like this where I just talk to a camera about life as a Christian man. Alright, so this video is about four takeaways that I experienced, or I could take away. Sorry, let me try that again. Here are 4 takeaways of life living as a Christian man in my 30s. Alright, so the first takeaway would be that every yes is as good as every no that you experienced. And what I mean by that is that ever since I came to Christ 7 years ago, my mindset had always been, God, if it is your will, take me along with you. And sometimes those doors are open. Sometimes those are the things that God opens up and you go, wow, this is exciting. I am curious to find out what's going to happen, right? And then we go for it and we go, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? But I realized that those yeses, those doors that God opened up for me were doors to actually help me grow in Christ-likeness. It helps me to grow in knowing His heart for me. But then there are moments where God also says no to me. And those no's were situations where I thought was the best idea. I thought it was the God idea, it was the right thing to do. And when those doors closed, in hindsight, I reflected about it and I realized that it was actually God's protection for me. It was in His mercy that He was protecting me from stumbling. He was protecting me from experiencing pain. He was protecting me from myself, And so I remember I read this quote recently and it said, God's grace is when God gives you what you don't deserve, and God's mercy is what God takes away the things in which you think you deserve. I might be butchering the entire quote by Dan Roberts, but I thought that was so, it spoke so clearly to me that God's grace is what we don't deserve. He gives us the things in which we don't deserve, whether it's the spiritual gifts, whether it's opportunities, whether it is a wife and a kid, And then in God's mercy, He removes the things in which we think we deserve, There are a lot of times that, I would think, yeah, I deserve certain things. I've worked hard for it. I've put in effort into this, But in God's mercy, He closed those doors, and I recognize that those no's are important too. Those no's are just as important as the yeses that God has given me. And so for the second takeaway, that was the first takeaway. The second takeaway for me would be that every moment can be worship if my heart is surrendered to God. I used to think that worship was just going to church and singing a few songs and feeling good and then listening to the message. But as I continued to walk with God, I realized that worship was just one aspect of a life of worship. A life of worship means that your entire being, your spirit, your body, your mind, everything is worship unto God. It's how we live our lives for Jesus, how we live a life that is surrendered to God. We could be singing songs in church, but if the rest of the days, the rest of the hours, the rest of the time, we are living a life that is separate from God, what is worship? What does worship even mean? And so, I think in my years of walking as a Christian man so far, is that I realized that worship comes in the form of an overflow from your heart. That when you are surrendered completely, when your heart is completely surrendered to God, that worship or that song or that expression of love for God is almost overflowing from that abundance of being with God, of surrendering to God. And I learned that from one of my mentors, one of the earliest mentors that I had, coming to know Jesus, is that he lives a life of complete surrender. He dedicates his life to God, even when his misunderstood. He still does it. He still surrenders his life to God. Because he knows that it is more important to follow the voice of God than to save your face. I don't know whether if this is like a known thing in the world, but in Singapore we say we like to save face. We like to protect our image, we like to protect our reputation. But I'm starting to learn that the more I try to save myself, the less I get to experience the grace of God. The more I try to protect myself, the less I get to appreciate and understand real worship to God. And so I feel that has been one takeaway for me, that my worship doesn't just stop at singing in church. My worship is my everyday just living for Him. And then that goes on to my third takeaway of being a Christian man in my 30s, is that feeling happy is good, but growth is better. Me and my wife, we've always spoke about this, or we've been talking about this, and we said, when we were single, all our personal challenges, all our hidden sins, our hidden challenges, stays hidden with the Lord. The moment we get into a relationship where we become boyfriend and girlfriend, hints of that starts coming out. It starts flowing out, and we work that out with each other, we work that out with God. We are figuring out how to be one. Can we actually blend together, And then after that, when we get married, everything gets revealed. Everything gets exposed. Everything opens up, and it's because we spend so much time together. We literally spend 24/7 together, the most time we've ever spent with one another, and everything gets exposed, and if we don't solve it or we don't figure that out, and we start to have a kid, all of that intensifies. And so I think, when we talk about our growth, our spiritual growth with the Lord, I feel like it's important, or what I've learned is that it's important to have a growth mindset. That the more we focus on stepping into arenas where it's going to be uncomfortable, stepping into places where we are challenged to do better, to follow God, to obey the words that is for our good, but we do not like it, and then go for it. So I think that growth has really been something that I've been that I'm taking away into my 30s, into my 40s, into the rest of my life, is that having a growth mindset for my spiritual life is so important. And I thank God for really an amazing wife who calls me out on my rubbish, calls me out for the things in which she can hold me accountable to. And so I think it's important to give permission to people. Of course, my wife has all permission to speak into my life and to correct me and to hold me accountable so that I can grow. And the main thing of her holding me accountable is that she wants to see me grow and be the best self that God has made me to be, the best Josh that God has made me to be. All right, and the last but not least, the fourth takeaway is actually a Chinese phrase or a Chinese idiom. You see, the funny thing is that God speaks to me. Okay, my Mandarin is not so good. Okay, my Chinese is not good. Anyone who knows me, who is watching this, my Chinese is really, really bad. I've never done well for Chinese. I've never understood it. I've never attempted to try and learn it, but ever since becoming a Christian, God speaks to me in Chinese sometimes. I know, it's crazy, all right? But there are random phrases, random verses, random words that God speaks to me, and I go, God, I hear you. Because in my own intellect, I won't be able to process that, or I wouldn't even be thinking about these words, but this word just comes up. And so the fourth takeaway is that it's a Chinese phrase that goes, 一山还比一山高, which means every mountain, there is always another mountain that's higher than the previous one. And when I think about that phrase, I reference it to my life when I'm walking with God. It's that every accomplishment, every victory that I've overcome, I realize that there will always be another mountain higher than this. There will always be another challenge that I will have to face. And I like to think that when we experience that, we get to grow. We get to grow in the direction in which God is leading us on. But it's also very humbling. It's very humbling because just when you think you know it all, there is something more that you need to know. There's so much more that you need to know. And I think there are two responses when that happens, when you realize that there is another mountain that's higher than the one you just scaled, right? And I would say that those two responses looks a little bit like this. The first response can go, I've conquered a mountain, it feels good, I look up and I see other mountains and I go, my goodness, this looks like I am defeated. I am defeated because I thought I already reached the top, and that's humbling, But I think the second response, which I've realized was the best way to go about it, was to, once you reach the mountain, you look up, and instead of looking defeated, feeling defeated, you look up in wonder. You look up at the mountains in wonder and go, wow, God, I am ready on that next adventure that you take me on. And when I started to view life, I view challenges like that, I view victories that I've won, whether it's overcoming certain sins, whether it is doing well in certain aspects of ministry, or just accomplishing certain challenges that I've experienced in my life. I can look up and go, God, you are taking me from glory to glory, molding my character, molding my faith, and taking me into deeper fellowship with you, deeper relationship with you. And so I think that is how I would like to view life, and hopefully that's something that you could receive as well, maybe, and I think that's my reflection of how being in my 30s as a Christian man looks like, since today is my birthday. Today is my 34th birthday. So I am so glad that, I get to do this life with Jesus. And I believe that, there are so many more things that God is going to take us on. God is going to propel us when we say yes to Him. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next one.